A very pleasant good afternoon to all of our viewers. We are delighted that you have joined us on another marriage encounter. I said marriage encounter, on another Let's Talk. You know, we do so many programs that sometimes, but I want to take the opportunity anyhow to wish all of the fathers who are listening at this time a happy Father's Day. Father's Day is celebrated, will be celebrated officially tomorrow. But of course, in the Seventh Adventist churches today, the emphasis was on fathers. So I want to say happy Father's Day to all of you. It is a good thing to be able to highlight our fathers. The fathers play a very important role. We will make some references to that this afternoon. On today's Let's Talk, we continue this series on ministering in a changing world. And today we're talking about family dynamics. Family dynamics. With us, we have a special guest as usual. Before we do that introduction, I'd like to invite you to bow your heads with us as we have a word of prayer. Father, be with us, grant us your peace and your grace. May we have a fruitful and productive discussion today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
My friends, our special guest for today is Pastor Stanton Adams. He is the newly appointed Family Life Director for the South Leeward Conference. Pastor Adams has a vast experience in the area of family life, psychotherapy and counseling. There are some other areas that he probably will tell you about in a little while. I think yes, grief counseling, that is an area that is so needed in today's world. But we're not so much here to talk about the qualification of the presenter. He is the Family Life Director. He's also responsible for stewardship and men's ministries, but we are talking family dynamics. And so, Pastor Adams, good afternoon. Welcome to Let's Talk once again.
Yes, good afternoon, and good afternoon to the entire constituency and our friends who are viewing. It is always my delight. Let's Talk is one of my must look at programs, whether I could see it live or the review afterwards. But very, very interesting, always stimulating, and I'm delighted that I could share with you this afternoon, Dr. Greene, dealing with the area that comes under my purview. As they said, one of the newly minted directors in the South Leeward Conference. It is my delight to be here.
We're certainly happy to have you, and we're looking forward to a great discussion. We are talking today about family dynamics, ministering in a changing world, family dynamics. Let's just jump right into the discussion. We are discussing ministering in a changing world. Perhaps we should begin by talking to some of the changes in the area of family dynamics. How has the family structure changed over the last years, and how has this impacted the kind of ministry we do today?
Well, we would want to say a very interesting, very important question, because the demographics of the society in which we do our work, where the church is planted, where we do mission, the demographic of the society, the social context is informed, also informed our church and the ministry that we have to deal with as it relates to family. The demographics that we are working with as we look at it, looking at what is happening with the families in this context, and in this context, not just the global context, but I will probably definitely refer to our context in the Caribbean where we reside, right? And that's one thing we have to pay attention to. The singles, how many of them do we have? We have the married, we have the divorced, we have the bereaved. And when we talk about the singles, we're talking about a whole category, several categories. Those who are single by choice, by those who are single by decision, those who are single because of death of a spouse, those who are single because of divorce. All of the needs of these may vary, but we have all of these types of families and their needs are different, and the dynamics that goes on within these particular units are diverse across the whole spectrum as we look at family ministries. And I want to say in general, and this is what makes the ministry so well, interesting. We talk to the ideal as it relates to the family, what it ought to be. But we also have to talk to the reality of what has gone wrong with the family. So it is we have to, while we talk to the ideal on one side, we cannot be indifferent to the challenges, the pain, and these dysfunctional situations that people may experience from time to time in their family experience based on what has happened. And so this is the reality that we have to confront, and the new, not just the single parenting, but we have to think about the same sex families that are emerging, and they also are clamoring for a number of things, for the rights, just like the traditional monogamous family. So all of these are challenges that we are facing, and how do we view all of these, and how do we minister in the particular context in which we do our work as a church, and specifically to the family ministries department.
Pastor Adams, they say that, of course, in this day and age with the internet, with Google, now generally artificial intelligence, you can ask a lot of questions and get responses. It's interesting what you just shared about the dynamics of changing families, and in sometimes I choose to ask Google some questions, and I ask them this question about how the family has changed over time. And it's interesting, and I wanted to react to this just very quickly, because it says that families have significantly shifted in terms of structure, going from two-parent households to a more eclectic expression of what it means to be a family. While in the 50s and 60s, there was more of an emphasis on family, including two parents and children. Now families have a much more diverse structure. You identified some of that diversity just now, but I am wondering, when you move away from in your terms, the monogamous traditional structure to the diversity, the single, the fatherless, the motherless, etc. Does it make ministry to families more challenging, generally speaking?
Much more challenging, and I didn't mention one part, the blended family, where you have families that have been separated and then remarried. You have the single income family with children. You have the double income blended family as emerged, in addition to all those that I've mentioned, right? Because people are separating and getting remarried, and some of them are remarried with children. That has its own complexity itself, and how do you merge all of that? There's a way that we prepare people in that sort of context, So yes, so it does make ministry much more challenging for us, because why? Because, when we talk family from our context, we are most of the time, if not all the time, referring to the traditional family structure. But we have to understand that as time progresses, that's why I said the issue of the demographic is important. We have to do a demographics of our church and the cultural context in which we are operating, because it is in this context that we carry out the mission of the church. We spread the gospel story, and people of all sorts may respond. And we prepared as a church to pay attention to all of these new emerging family types that we'll have to deal with, and the various peculiarities. For example, even our context now, as we have it in our context now, when we talk to singles in our congregation, are we just talking about somebody who was never married? No, that's not the context. We have singles who are because they were separated, divorced. We have singles because of death, and all of those. So it's not what we traditionally thought it was. Those and those singles who are single because of divorce, the challenges are sometimes so tremendous, and we are not even aware. We don't sometimes we don't even have a ministry or a support group to deal with that category of single by itself. What about a single person who has child or children but was never married? Not enough time, not enough resources, not enough energy. All of these are the challenge of singles, right? But remember, I said that we have a single parent, and in least instances, you might have a single parent who are male, but most of the time, it's a single mom with children. These are issues that we have to address as we look at the for the discussion. I think I will talk to that a little bit some more, because I said that I am more inclined to pay attention to our context, our region in which we function as a religious body, as a church.
Okay, certainly. Now, I mean, I clearly see that there's so much to talk about the various aspects of family. But, as I mentioned in the introduction, today, tomorrow is Father's Day, and I don't want for us to zero in on the matter of fatherhood a little bit. I mean, this alone can take up the entire program, so we're going to be very limited. But the issue of fathers. Fathers play a very important role in family life. Can you highlight some of the contributions fathers make to strong families?
Significant. I was, in fact, actually did a research and put a little paper together on the significant role of the father in the home and the community. That was many years ago when I was past family ministries leaders in my home country. I think it was somewhere there I was tasked with that responsibility. But I just want to say now that, traditionally we said how crucial and important the role of the mother is, because that is how in the agrarian context, in the agrarian society, the role of the mother was in the home. But we have moved past that now, where you have more than 80% of the women are in the world of work. And there's not a balancing of the roles as it relates to male who are fathers in the individual households. Now, that role is so very, very crucial. So it's not just the role of the mother, but the role of the father is equally important in today's context. In fact, Baldrick and Baldrick, Contemporary Christian Family, I think that's the name of the book, if I remember correctly. I had that, a tremendous piece of book. I don't know where I left it, where I lost it. But Baldrick and Baldrick said it's a husband and wife team, Jack and Judith Baldrick. I had that book from your studying family life. Society will be for the better when both parents raise their children together, meaning that the father, since you said this is Father's Day and Father's Day weekend, we should talk to that. The role of the father is a very significant one. And the absence of the father in that context is not just a loss, but research is saying to us, contemporary research is saying to us that the loss of the father in his role in the family setting is not just a loss, but is a major loss. Notice my word, not just a loss, but a major loss.
Pastor, I was pouring through the statistics in a few of the past statistical reports from the census here in Antigua Barbuda. I kind of enjoy looking at the revelations that come out of those things, and I was rather alarmed at the number of households that you have children who are fathered by different fathers. So you may have a household with 3 children and they're 3 different fathers, which effectively means that even though they may be exposed to a father figure, it's not necessarily their biological father. And then you have those households that they're not exposed to any fathers at all. So you mentioned the absence of the father, and that's what I want to zero in on in this next question, the issue of the absentee father. and how that is impacting society.
Well,
When you grow up in a home and there's no father, what does that do to you?
yeah, three. We have to talk about the vanishing father, the absent father, the serial father, right? And we have to understand what is happening with Caribbean sexuality, why that information that you got just about Antigua alone, right? Because what we're having is we are having we are having transactional sexual relationships. That's part of the Caribbean context. So that is why you would see that situation where three different fathers. So a woman may get pregnant for this one, and then afterwards he abandons, and then another one steps in, and then she gets two more for that one, and then another one steps in, and that's the situation, right? And so we don't have a constant father presence, and the father is most likely to remove from that role once he knows that somebody else has entered the picture and is now a part of the woman's life that he fathered that first child with. This is the kind of a situation that we have here, and that's a whole different, and in fact, a whole program alone by itself we would need to talk to the issue of this situation, because they're really affecting the Caribbean sociology and the Caribbean family as we study the Caribbean family and what is happening with the Caribbean family. I can say to you that Caribbean female-headed household is more than 70%. More than 70% of the household in the Caribbean are female-headed households. And so the research is showing to us now, not only in the Caribbean region, that 50% of our children will grow up without a father figure in the home. Cross-cultural research done over 40 cultures, including the Caribbean cultures, show that crime rates are highest among children and adults who were raised particularly by mothers. The incident of teen pregnancy, the incident of gang mentality, the incident of substance abuse, and all of these are some of the social ills. So what we are seeing in the context in the Caribbean in terms of crime and immorality and delinquency in all its forms can be traced right back there, because remember, the ideal was that God intended that both the father and the mother contribute to the training and rearing of a child. So for a single mother, which most of the part they are, to play that role is very, very challenging. And that's becoming more and more complex because of the times to which we have come. Because remember, traditionally when they were single parents, and so they had quite a lot of support. The village helped to raise the child. That's no longer the situation. In fact, you have to be so very mindful who else is influencing your child in your absence. And so we have dropped the ball in this area, right? And so the village is no longer raising the child. So the single parent, the single mother for the most of the part, has to be doing both the role of the father and the mother without any help whatsoever. That can be very challenging because not only Antigua, but it's in kids here. This is pretty much the pattern.
Now, I kind of want to slow you down there, Pastor. I mean, we said a lot just now, and it is true that we have 1 hour to digest all of this material, and if means be, then we will have to have an additional program to deal with these. But I
Yes,
want to go back. I certainly want to go back to your reference to transactional sex and what that does. And then you shared some amazing statistics that I also want to go back to. But let's first talk about this matter of transactional sex, because of course, with this emphasis on freedom, and we are right to do what we want to do, how we want to do it, you know, I mean, I also am concerned about, you know, the age of consent versus when a person can be legally married, etc. There are these, you know, things that just don't line up well. But if people, in spite of the technology, in spite of the emphasis on protecting yourself and all the rest of it, we still continue to see a lot of pregnancies, a lot of individuals who are bearing children and they're not married. Some believe it is the ideal thing to do. They don't want to be bogged down in a commitment, but they're still having children. There are some persons who believe, and I've come across a few individuals who think that one of their life's goal is to get a child, but they certainly don't have marriage in mind. And
Right.
so it is important for them to have sex. And
Mhm.
I came across an individual one time who told me that she did announce that she was going to get a child the year coming. And at that particular time, when she was pretty sure she was going to get a child, she was not sure who she was going to get a child for.
Mhm.
So your reference to transactional sex is an interesting reference. But the outcome and the implications for our society. So you mentioned that did you say 70% of
Yes,
households are led
70% of
by
them. Yeah,
mothers?
women in the Caribbean region.
Now that answers a lot of questions with respect to the upsurge in crime, the gang violence, and
Mhm.
those. So I want you to go into a little detail with how the absent father can influence a young man, and in some instances, a young lady, to get involved in crime.
Mm. Well, yes, because most of the times I'll be saying, and let me say it's because you were asking about this, that is the emerging thing. Girls who are between 15 to 19, I'm talking about Caribbean statistics or demographic, because you said I'm a pay attention to our because 15 to 19, who have 3, 4 children for different men, right? Transactional sex simply means that I am involved with this guy because he pays the rent. I'm involved with the other one because he gives me the grocery. I'm involved with the other one because he's responsible for my cosmetics and hairdo and all of these things, yes. And so that's the situation. Now, simply, a lot of times, these relationships where the single mother is there, it means that the father is absent, and she has all of this stress and worry and frustration with limited resources, because a number of times, even though in some instances you have professional women in the Caribbean who have an income and all of that, and they have a child or children, they have maybe the financial resources, but not financial resources alone is needed for the rounded development of the child, right? And what, because you asked earlier, what is the role of the father? He brings that stability. He brings that moral example. He sets that role model for the child, so that when this woman is there, for the most part, frustration and lashes out at this young child, particularly the boy, right? Because the statistics are showing that boys are more likely to get involved with gangs and drugs and so than the girl who is raised by a single mom. So we're talking specifically to a gender here, right? As has emerged in the Caribbean region here. So out of that frustration, she cannot parent the boy, and most of the times the parenting style would either be authoritarian, permissive, neglectful. Any one of those three, you are talking about raising a delinquent. Any one of those three, right? Because, like I said, as a single mom, don't have the resources, don't have the time, don't have the energy. Then, if that's the case, then somebody else is going to be influencing the mind of the child. And a lot of times, children in those kind of contexts, first of all, they don't feel a sense of love, a sense of connection, a sense of belonging. They have serious self-esteem, self-worth problem. And somebody who has those kind of issues is capable of causing injury to themselves as well as to others. And if you look at all of the statistics, you look at the police reports, you look at juvenile delinquency reports, you will notice that this statistic is showing up. Where are these children coming from? And most of the time, you look at it, those who are in prison, fatherless. Either their father, their grandfather, their uncle, or somebody else was incarcerated. And so that pattern just continues.
So we have a compounded situation here, because even the link between the mother who has limited resources and is dependent on a man to do something. In the meantime, in the process rather, she gets a child or two. She becomes a bad example for them. If she has a young
Yes.
girl The girl believes that when I want money, this is what I do. And she then, in her teenage, now gets involved in this transactional sex. She wants to keep up with her peers. She wants to look nice. So she gets somebody to contribute towards her hairstyling, and she gets somebody to contribute towards the brand name clothes that she wants to put on, etc.
Yes,
And
yes.
eventually we have a cycle, because she's
Yes,
going to
it's a
eventually become
cycle.
pregnant,
Right.
and the whole cycle starts over.
Right. So while the boys may get involved in violent crimes, the girls are more likely to maybe turn to substance and will more than not get pregnant out of wedlock. The statistics shows that very clearly, right? That the girls are more likely to get involved in those areas and more likely to get out of wedlock pregnancy.
So what message, again, this is Father's Day weekend, talk to the men, for me. You're also men's ministries director, so say something to the men, because this is not a good thing. I mean, if you have a child and you're not supervising your child, you are not there to take care of your child. The fathers in my congregation today were challenged in terms of being an encourager, being a role model, being somebody who will guide their children along. That absence is creating havoc. What do you say to the men who are listening to this?
Yes, and that is so true. So you have to be there to be a positive role model. You have to provide support, right? Because the man is not just a sperm donor. Mrs. Adams was presenting today at another church, and I was able to peek a little bit in our notes. But I have my own thing. So you're not just a sperm donor. You have to be a positive role model. You're a leader, and not just a leader, but you're also a spiritual leader. And that's talking to Christian men. You have to give a sense of identity. Not all men are Christian men, but they still do provide leadership, and the outcome is much more better than when no leadership at all was provided. In fact, the research is showing us that even if the father is not domiciled in the home with the child, once he's involved in the life of the child as a male parent, the outcomes are better than when he's absent altogether. Right? The outcomes are better than when he's absent altogether. But you have to be there to be a father, right? You have to give a sense of quality time. You have to be present. You have to be involved in training. You have to be a teacher. You have to give the sense of identity. All of these things, that's your role. Is not just to provide a shelter, roof over the head, clothing on the back, and food in the stomach. There's much more there, right? So you have to be that positive role model. You have to support. You have to be a teacher. You have to be involved in the training. We often thought that, okay, that's the role of the woman. The father only comes in when they discipline. No. The father is a major part of the discipling process of the child. You see, and discipling is different from the type of discipline what we think about as Caribbean people, right? That in other words, we're saying that's a whole other discussion by itself.
Certainly.
So there are roles that is designed, God-given role that the father has to play, right? He's not just the male biological parent, but he has all of these roles to perform, right?
Well, I kind of want to jump in here, Pastor, because of course we have limited time, but additionally, there is, to complicate the matter a little bit, there is technology. You have these days, technology has advanced significantly. So a man may decide that he's going to contribute his sperm to the sperm bank, and a woman pursues her career, and later on in life she decides, I want a child. And she goes to the sperm bank if she has the financial resources, and she gets a child. The child never gets to know who the father is. That creates a certain kind of challenge that I kind of want you to speak to, because you're emphasizing the Caribbean society, and that is true. But of course, this program is beamed all around the world, and it is important for us, while we speak to our local context, there are others who listen as well. And the reality of the matter is that there are people in the Caribbean who have these options available to them likewise, once you have the financial resources. So my question more directly has to do with the technological advances of in vitro fertilization and sperm banks and the like. How has all of this changed the traditional view of ministry? Because you can have a situation where a young lady turns up pregnant in your congregation, and she did not. I'm trying to choose my words carefully here.
She did not sleep with a
Not
man.
sleeping with a man.
She did not sleep with a man, right?
Exactly, but she's pregnant. So
yeah.
Speak to that.
Oh yes, well, we do have that situation, and I think we did have a situation like that surfaced, and that is why the General Conference had to put out a position. In fact, we have several positions about artificial insemination, in vitro fertilization, all of these things. We have a position statement. If and I encourage the constituency, those who are on this program live here this afternoon, my family ministries leaders, and so I think well, when we have our meeting, which we are supposed to, I will say that our General Conference has a position statement on these things, on this particular issue, right? While people have the personal choice to exercise, they have to also consider both the ethical and the spiritual, and even from the stewardship. Now, he said, I am also a steward leader. Everybody has a desire for a child or children, and so medical technology can aid in an infertile couple, you know. But these things must be practiced in harmony with sound biblical and moral and ethical principles. I think that's the church's position, right? Even when we're going to consider these options, we have to consider, and you mentioned that the cost that is involved and all of that. And I don't say not just the financial cost, but the other costs that may be involved, you know, because remember, you're going to still have the absence of the male, that figure. And so you're coming back to actually looking at the very issues that we were talking about before, that this is going to be a single person, whether you are a professional woman or whatever, raising a child without a father, right? In the instance where there's a married couple and there's some issue, some biological issue, and then that's a decision that they have to make prayerfully and with all the guidance from the medical professionals, and considering all of the other factors, both the spiritual and the ethical issues. And that is something that they have to probably approach very prayerfully and make their individual decisions. But in going forward, I guess we're going to have more conversation, more discussion as a world denomination on this matter, because not only us, there are other people who have put out a statement, the Moravians have put out a statement, Catholics have this statement on these issues. But like I said, we have our position statement, and we can go on General Conference. It's beautifully laid out there, step by step, and they have some guidelines as to what we can look at as Seventh Adventist believers when we are considering those options.
We have a question that I want you to respond to at this time, and that is in reference to the percentage of household, Caribbean households that are headed by mothers. The person is indicating that is astounding, but more importantly, how do we pull this back? What can the church do? You know, in the matter of, you said earlier that the research does support the fact that a biblical position is correct. I mean, the research may not say that outright, but God's design is that a man and a woman head the household. And if 70% of the households these days are headed by women, it clearly shows that something is wrong. Somewhere along the line, the men are absent. In fact, when I look in our congregations, I realize that men are indeed absent in a number of instances. So the question is, what can the church do to pull this back?
Oh. It's a big question, because I don't know. There are several things that we can possibly do and that we need to do, and we have to begin to deal with the issue of education, and we have to talk to the issue. In fact, we have to begin to make, well, not begin, ever since way back then, Family Ministries is one of the later ministries that came into the church. But we have to make this ministry a front burner ministry and issue where we can talk to this matter. Because remember, I said family ministry, we are juxtaposed both between the ideal and we have to also deal with the dysfunction and the pain and the brokenness of families. Right. In fact, that's what the Bible really is. The Bible is the textbook for family ministries, really, because it deals with two families, the family of Christ and the family of Abraham. And in the family of Abraham, we see all this pain and dysfunction and brokenness and some things that we will experience in our lives, even in our traditional, in our family of origin situation. It is only the grace of God that can really bring us through these things, because he's talking about healing of our pain and brokenness and restoring us and breaking the cycle, because the families we come from are the families we create. The patterns tend to persist. Had it not been for the grace and the intervention on some form of intervention, all of us, if not most of us, will perpetuate the same family of origin issues from whence we came. So the church have to really get down, tackle down to look at the demographic and how can we specifically address all of these variations of the family types that we have in the church. And as I said, it is just a microcosm of the society, because the church really reflects the society, and we might be amazed, right, as to how much of the society is reflected in the church if you really get down to deal with the demographics and to really respond to the needs of all of these types. So education, right, is a major area, because family ministries deal with education, we deal with enrichment, we deal with counseling. All of these areas have to come together to help people to heal the pain of the past and brokenness and correct, and don't perpetuate that same pattern from whence I came. It's a lot of work, and it will have to take a multi-sectorial approach, because I don't think it's just the church alone. We have to think about the family context, the wider family context in which the church resides, various communities. And so who else do we have to bring on board? It just can't be one entity alone. It has to be a multi-sectoral approach. We have to have a lot of education. And one of the things, and I'm going to run again myself, you asked about men's ministry. The boys to men, because the roles of father are so obscured in our context, in our region. Guys are growing up, but they have not been trained or taught how to be fathers. That's a need. Mentorship, how do we do that when you have so many households that are headed by women? So it's quite a lot that we have to do. So in our context, in the church itself, we have to see how we can maybe allow for this kind of mentorship program to take place. Those of us who are fathers in the church, who are spiritual fathers, we have to mentor the young guys in the church who are coming from fatherless home. We have to take them under our wings, under our umbrella, as we say. And I was one of those. My father was not absent, but my father was not a spiritual man. He was not a church man. It was the fathers of the church that gave me that component of my life, of my spiritual foundation and formation. The kind of wisdom and advice and challenges that you have to encounter and how to face life. These were the church fathers that provided this for me as a youngster, because my father was not a member of the church. I never became a member of the church. So we have to see how we can use the resources that we have and just try to mentor the young men and to chart a different course for them. And I think that that program for the men is going to be very important. How do we mentor our young guys to take on the serious role of responsibility of fathering and family life in general, and how they themselves can come over their past experiences and do differently.
Let me jump in here with this question. Something you said there just kind of brought this question to my mind here. So I'm going to jump in and ask it, because one of the things I noticed coming out of the pandemic is that a number of younger people are choosing not to come to church. And, generally across the board, I think you do have a struggle with many young people who find church disinteresting. Now, considering the role you mentioned, for example, your father was not a member of the church, and you got from the church fathers that exposure, the instruction, the modeling, the guidance. When young people do not go to church, when they are not availing themselves of the such things that the church offers, the opportunity to be molded by these fathers, and even those who are choosing to not congregate, but tune into a church service on Sabbath morning. The fellowship dimension is not there. It's just a virtual world that they're functioning in. So what danger do these people put themselves in terms of creating that level of nurturing and guidance? How disadvantaged is it for them not to utilize the opportunity that the church provides?
Yeah, and that's a problem, right? And I'm not so sure that we are really recovered, because a lot of our young people, the millennials particularly, they're in a class by themselves. In fact, they don't engage you so much in conversation, so you have to reach out to them. We have to make it an interest, a personal interest of ours. But I think that for the most part, from my experience, it's a relational thing. Young people will be exposed, will be inclined to listen to you, let you be their confidant. Once you establish that relationship with them, I think that's the issue. We have dropped the ball in not really establishing genuine relationship for young people. We only catch them in the wrong. We don't validate them, as the young people say. We don't big them up, and so we have to change that narrative that the young people have in their head about us about older people in church, right? And we have to break down the walls of partition. I would normally say our church should not and don't have a generation gap. You see, we have to establish relationship for young people. Bottom line, once we establish that relationship, we can influence them, and we'll get them to come into the space, if not church. And talking to them and mentoring them don't necessarily have to be in the church space, right? A social night, a date night by my house or by your house. All of us are so busy now, and I don't know busy doing what, but if we are really, really concerned about our young people and we want to guide them in these areas, particularly our young men, and so we have to be intentional, and we have to put out the effort to reach them in all of the ways possible we can. But to me, the bottom line is to establish relationship, and we have to go out of our ways. We have to go out of our ways to establish that type of relationship with our young men and women as well. And in fact, the Council of the Writing said that, we should have a class in our churches. Every church should have a school for our young men and young women, training them how to be husbands and wives and fathers. And so we should have, in other words, it may not necessarily be a school, but some space where this instruction is taking place. And that's biblical, right? If we go and read over there in Titus, we will see that, right? And so that principle is brought out in the writing itself. So to me, the whole thing is relational. And I think we have dropped the ball there, and we have to take responsibility for that. And even if it means to apologize and to talk to our young people differently, I think we need to do that.
Well, we do have men's ministry, we do have women's ministry, your men's ministry. Last week, I did not even in my introduction express gratitude to Dr. Knowles for leading out last week. I was away at a religious liberty seminar, and I'm grateful. But we also had the women's ministry director on last week. Of course, she was.
Yes, and he did he did a good job. He did a good job.
Yes.
I was on. I was following.
And I want to take the opportunity to just give a quick shout out to the folks over in Dominica, because so many of them told me that they listen regularly to this program. But I was saying last week we had a women's ministry director on. She may not have been functioning in that capacity, but that is something. Now I want to jump over to the matter of singles. We're not going to have time. I wanted to speak to some issues relating to marriage, but we can always come back. We have had several programs on marriage. So I wanted to ask this question. Very often, the singles say that they're overlooked in programs such as these. Singles, earlier on, you did mention that there are lots of challenges that singles face, So let me just not even say that, but go somewhere else. Many of the single ladies in the church often complain that there is a scarcity of eligible males. We're going back to the issue of men again, right? Men with ambition and moral character. They say that there's a scarcity of such men for them to consider. Now I cannot disagree sometimes when I look at the church. I look at, again, the statistics, and we see that men are a minority in educational institutions, in various sectors in the work environment. They are a majority in the prison. They are a majority in the gangs, etc. So the numbers are high in the wrong areas. That's the point I'm making.
Yeah.
You are men's ministry director, your family life director. The ladies are crying out, the single ladies are crying out. We're talking about singles here. They want to get married, they want to form meaningful relationships, but they're not seeing the kind of men that they want to spend their lives with. What do we do? What do you say to them?
That's a big question. It's a hard question, and because it is real, the proportion to eligible and marriageable men in the church in relation to women, yeah, it is quite on an uneven proportion, and that's our reality, right? And but let's say the men that we have, how many of them do we have, and how can we help the men to move from the point where they are to the point where they can become eligible? Again, that's the role, part of the work of the men's ministries department. How do we help to empower and get our men to take on and fulfill the God-given potential that they have? And how can the women play a role in that regard? I think that they have to be a conversation between both sexes, both the males and the females, because I've heard the argument from the other side of the men also that, okay, sometimes some of the expectations of the women on them are too high and unrealistic. They can't meet up to those. So how do we have a conversation with both and balance that off, right? And so, yes, we really have that issue. And is it that we need to intentionally target men and, have some more men come to the faith? Do we have to target men in our strategies of reaching out, of mission, evangelism? And how do we do that? All of these things, all of these conversations we need to have. And how do we talk to the male in the church, the males in the church that we already have, to change their posture, their position, so that they can now become eligible, that our women will pay attention to them and not necessarily look elsewhere. Is a conversation that we'll have to have with both sexes, with both groups, and there are some initiatives that we need to take. Somebody told me since I came into the ministry, Pastor, the first thing we need to have is a singles retreat. And one of the conference presidents that were there said, I am making my place available for you to come for your first. You can come to my country, my field, for your single retreat. So maybe you have to think about a single retreat. We'll have to have a conversation with both groups. We'll have to deal with the men by themselves, those whom we have, what it is that we can do to help the men to come to some level of their own personal growth and development, where they themselves. So we need a rigorous program, a rigorous and equally rigorous program for male empowerment. And when I talk about male empowerment, I'm talking to this issue itself, how to have men develop the skills that they need for family and relationships. These skills that are so crucial and important that males need to acquire to make them, what we say, marriageable material.
Yeah, that is so true. Male empowerment, it's a good area. I do want to say too, one of the realities that confront us is that we do evangelism on a regular basis. We are very aggressive with evangelism, and so we add people, and sometimes we bring people in who have been messed up and who have been misdirected, and so we have to intentionally educate people about getting their lives in order. And I think generally the church does an amazing job at taking people off the streets and giving them a renewed perspective on life. I've seen so many persons coming to church. Pastor Adams, you may remember when we had access to what was the program called now? GED. We used to run that program.
Yes.
And many young people who dropped out of high school and for whatever reason did not have an opportunity to finish their secondary education, were able to finish their secondary education, get a certificate, and go on to university. And some of them are doctors and nurses and all kinds of professionals today. So the church does emphasize that continual development. But I think also there are some little things that our ladies can give attention to as well. In your respective, now this may seem simple, but in your respective congregation, you may not have a lot of men because men are limited, but you can move around. You can visit churches, you can travel. And we have youth camp. In fact, in a few weeks' time, we're going to be having our youth camp here in SLC. And it's a good opportunity to go to youth camp because you're going to be mingling with peers, people like you who are serious. I know from my own camping experience that camping can be a very spiritually charged, refreshing experience that get people to really think about their stand with God. But it also exposes you to people from other congregations, other islands. You're going to have folks from Montserrat, from St. Kitts, from Nevis, from Antigua, etc., and so on. And these opportunities, these create opportunities for you to be able to get exposure. In addition, finally, I would say, if you go to university, because you're going to university, if you go to CUC, for example, I'm still saying CUC, Pastor, USC. If you go to USC, you are going to meet ambitious people who want to develop themselves, who want to expose themselves, and you are removing yourself from a little congregation with maybe 10, 15 persons. Let's say 10 females, 5 males, your age group, but you're putting yourself on a campus situation where you have lots of Seventh-day Adventists who desire to improve themselves. And so you're just giving added exposure and creating the opportunities to be able to get meaningful relationships.
Yes, and you're correct. That's why I said it can be a multi-sectoral, inter-department thing. Men ministries have to work close with women ministries. How do we talk to this thing? And you're right, because even in my own experience, there were some ladies who, professional teachers, who gave their extra time in the afternoon and the weekends to prepare guys who came in the church, who had some ambition left in them. And like you said, they went on to write a few subjects, write the GED, went on to college. Some of them are doctors, as you said today. And that's true. I don't want to call names, but at least from my home conference, I know that for sure, right? That somebody gave some extra time and paid attention. So once the man has some ambition and potential is there, I would say to the young lady, go after him, encourage him. In fact, I was not thinking anyway about theology and going to the level that I went to, but I came into church and met my wife. And she, somehow, however I looked and whatever I said, she was my main motivator. Even when I got to college and I wanted to return home because I didn't like the place, I didn't like the food, I didn't like the culture. I mean, she wrote me a letter and said, stay there and do what you have to do. I guess that's one of the reasons, one of the many reasons why I married her. So yes, you can have a woman, a guy come to the church, he doesn't have this kind of vision yet. He doesn't, that is not the goal or plan for life. You can be such a motivation and inspiration, so we just have to, women have to look out, look out for the guys who are at church and do they have a plan? Do they have something? But they just need somebody to push them or to help them. And we have to see how all of us can do this and help.
Pastor, your story is such an amazing story. I absolutely like that story that you shared here, that little testimony, because it highlights an aspect that we often overlook. And you yourself disclosed in there that you came in the church, you developed a relationship with this young lady, and she encouraged you. She saw the potential.
Yes.
I learned somewhere along the line that you were an outstanding athlete, and
yeah,
I know
I was going to play for West Indies. I had nothing but theology and church in my head. My mind was going to my West Indies, dashing right-handed opener.
So here is a young lady who directed you in the right path. And then you mentioned that it's a pity our time is running out here, but you mentioned that even when you went to university, you felt like quitting. And
yes.
she wasn't even there in person, but she wrote you and said, listen, stay there, get what you have to get. And so this is somebody who saw potential and pursued that kind of potential. I think this is outstanding. It's a pity that our time is winding down, but you wanted to say something else, so go right ahead.
Yes, I was going to say, as we pull all this together, I just want to repeat what I said from the beginning, so that we all end this program with the hope, because we're talking to family ministries and all of the issues that are real, and we cannot play the proverbial ostrich to say that these are not real issues that we have to address as a church. And I'm not so sure I can say that we are ready and really fully prepared in every iota to deal with some of these issues that we have. But we have to use the professional, the paraprofessionals, and the outline that I've sent to you. How can we, and from my meeting that we had on Thursday, there are something that can be rolled out so that we as family ministry leaders can multiply ourselves through our laity or particularly our lay professionals, that all of us can be able to deliver the kind of quality family life education to our churches and to the community around us, because education is power. And a lot of people, just some, psychoeducation and showing people a better way and that they can do differently. That's all it takes. And once we have willing and committed people, I think we will be able to improve and to add and to help our families to grow and mature some more. The tension, family ministries present the ideal, but yet family ministry is a ministry of grace that says that in spite of our pain and dysfunction and brokenness, the grace of God can get us through some things, and we can turn around and heal ourselves, heal our families, and try to live the ideals that God has established in His Word and in the spirit of prophecy that we have.
Well, thank you so much, Pastor Adams. It was a joy speaking with you today. We scratched the surface in many areas. Of course, we only had 1 hour, but these are the challenges that we have, and I'm grateful that we are willing to respond to them in a positive way. We are going to be back next week again, and we want to encourage those of you who have been listening, who have been sharing the link, to continue to do so. That's all our time for today. May God bless you. And again, I want to say to all of our fathers, very happy Father's Day. You have been challenged today, many areas that require urgent intervention, but you have to begin with you. So may God bless you, and may you be kept safe. God bless.
God bless you too, Dr. Greene, and thanks for the viewership and those who are listening and who are on this afternoon. May God bless all of us as we work for the improvement